So I decided to review more Star Wars right as soon as May the 4th ended, because I'm clearly failing at all standards of nerddom. Sorry, but I've had dissertations to finish, exams to revise for, and pens to sniff. Dooku Jedi Lost is an audiobook written by Cavan Scott, who I don't think has done too much outside of this, and it's narrated by a full cast. Reviewing this felt appropriate since the last Star Wars thing I covered on here was Tales of the Jedi. And surprisingly, I do have things to talk about. Our framing device is that Ventress, very early on in her apprenticeship, on a mission from Dooku to help her investigation, she has to watch holograms of the Count's early life. Through these, we witness Dooku from a youngling to a Padawan to a Jedi Master, all the while he grows more and more disillusioned with the Republic and the Jedi. So this book can mostly be divided into these vignettes. Dooku and Cypher Dyas exploring the temple at night, discovering how to use Force lightning, visiting his mother's funeral in a scene that's basically straight out of Pet Sematary. It's funny because I would have thought a plot like this would have been a better fit for TV rather than what they did for Tales of the Jedi. And hey, maybe what they did there in terms of Yaddle and Qui-Gon, maybe a novel might have suited that more. But I digress. There's been plenty of discussion here on the internet about what makes a good prequel. Speaking only for myself, I kinda want them to throw me off a bit. Show me what I didn't expect to see rather than what I could have inferred from the original text. I was a little harsher than I needed to be on Tales of the Jedi, just because I kind of felt like I knew everything it told me about Dooku. Suggesting that Qui-Gon dying is what broke the camel's back wasn't explicit in Attack of the Clones, but it also isn't too much of a leap. Here's one surprise that I was a bit mixed on. The fact that Dooku isn't raised at all on Sereno before he's taken in by the Jedi. He's thrown out as a baby, his father thinks he's a freak, and he only finds out about his heritage when he visits the planet later with Jedi as a youngling and he runs into his sister by accident. This diverges from the original backstory he had in some of the Legends media, and I've got to say that made more sense to me at first. Part of Dooku's problem, especially when contrasted with Anakin, who was a slave, is that, well, he's a nobleman. But that aspect isn't lost here. He still finds out that he's from nobility very early on in his development, so he's given a reason to think he's better than everyone else, but he can't actually benefit from that, and that's kept frustratingly at a distance. Kinda like Anakin, he's told he's the chosen one, but then in the temple he gets treated like everyone else, sometimes even worse. It also explained where Dooku got his idealism from. If he had been raised on Sereno, grown up in a system that provides him with benefits and privilege, he might have turned out more like his brother and his father, people who don't actually want to make things better for the people they govern. Ventress surmises that his polished boots and well-tailored capes and castles are all Dooku playing king. They're a means to an end, and privately he still kinda lives like a monk. Probably the most interesting idea this novel presents us with is that Dooku was talking to his sister, Jenna, for years, unbeknownst to the Council. It's sort of an inversion of Anakin's origin. What if he had just been allowed to stay with his mom? Seriously, fellas, just let him call his mom. Whilst Vader abuses his family members, he never could bring himself to completely destroy any of them. And spoilers for this novel, Dooku gets more and more disconnected from his family, going from his father to having to kill his brother, to finally having Ventress murder his sister, offering perhaps a reason why he couldn't be brought back from the dark side in the same way. We also get a lot of insight into Ventress and the relationship she had with her master Kai. For a lot of her sections of the novel, she's speaking to his Force ghost, though she thinks it's a hallucination. Him and Dooku basically play angel devil on Ventress's shoulders, and given that Dooku is alive and Kai is not, it makes sense who she ends up listening to. I want to use a section of this book as a sort of microcosm for the whole thing. Cypher Dyas has a vision of a planet that's about to be hit by a solar storm in a way that will completely cripple its electronics and cause mass destruction. Yoda and the Council want to wait and meditate on it, and we're not really given a reason why they're not doing anything about it immediately. Yoda only says the future is uncertain. Now, if we compare this with Anakin's visions of his mother and Padme, you could argue that interfering has a danger of self-fulfilling prophecy. But I don't know what the actual consequences would be if they had just, say, warned the planet that something bad might happen. Apart from maybe mild embarrassment if nothing does actually go wrong. I know the Jedi's negligence is kind of the whole point here, and it certainly does make Dooku's frustration relatable, but it's kind of straddling the line between a critique of the Order that has actual legs and an idiot plot. Ultimately, it can become a little one-note and repetitive. I think that's always going to be the tricky thing with Dooku's origin story. He's a Jedi who turned Sith because of legitimate issues with the Republic, and it does right itself in a lot of ways, but that means that it's always going to be kind of predictable, and at the end of the day, the failings of the Republic that drove him to Sidious are almost interchangeable when you see this scenario presented with over and over again in the expanded media. But that's probably just a me hang-up from all this exposure to ancillary material. Overall, it's an interesting enough yarn, especially with this cast. Orla Cassidy nails Ventress. Ewan Morton isn't trying to sound anything like Christopher Lee or Corey Burton, but he makes the character his own.
I have many enemies, Ventress. The things they would do to her to learn my secrets. The torture they would inflict.
But not the Jedi. They do not torture.
Are you sure?
It is not their way. That amuses him. A smile tugs at his mouth, but there is no warmth to it. This is the Dooku I have come to know. The mask is back on.
And between this and Tales of the Jedi, you get a pretty cohesive overview of Dooku before Attack of the Clones. Jedi Lost is the story of how Dooku became the Count. Tales of the Jedi is how he actually turned to the dark side. Although Qui-Gon is alive when he decides to become the Count Sereno in this, so I suppose at this point in Tales of the Jedi, he's already left, and he's walking around like he still goes to this place. That must be incredibly awkward. So overall, the moral of the story is you should avoid toxic behaviours like enslaving people, having your family members assassinated, and generally going into politics.